Hi, I'm Erin with Body of Light Studio, and today we're going to tap into the back body. We're going to take a look at some of our anatomy and use the imagery and the sensation of our back body to give a nice, calm, soothing, supportive breath so that your nervous system can be soothed and also your movement and your posture a little bit more easeful. So let's go take a look at our skeleton. Here's our skeleton. And we're going to take a look at the floating ribs. You've got two sets. Most people have two sets of floating ribs. Some people have more, some people have less, but most of us have two. Our 11th and 12th ribs do not attach to anything except for the spine. As you can see from the front of the body, your top ribs attach directly into your sternum and the bottom ribs indirectly through this cartilage up into the sternum. But these floating ribs, they just widen straight out into your waist. And some people's are even shorter than this. They're really fine, delicate bones. So that's one thing we'll talk about today while we're doing our work. And then the other is your first vertebra, atlas. So I'm gonna kind of get behind him here and touch the sides of his atlas. There it is, touching the side of his atlas right here. And you can see from the side, it comes right out underneath your ear. And it's really wide. We've all heard of atlas holding up the world. So my atlas will be right about here, kind of like those Frankenstein bolts in the sides of your neck. All right, let's go back to the mat and get started. Begin on our hands and our knees, and you'll lengthen your left leg back behind you. Swing your right foot over to the left. So I'm kind of pivoting on the right knee, and you'll slide your left knee behind your right knee and then widen your feet away from one another and sit down. And this is where, if this is not accessible to you at all, maybe you can't get this low or it bothers your knees or your ankles, you can sit up on one of your blocks or your blankets. So situate yourself so that your ankles and knees are comfortable. It's a deep stretch in the hips and that's fine, but we don't want any pinching in the hips. You'll need to be higher if the hips are pinching. And then once you're situated, we want the feet to be about equidistant from the hips. So I've got to move my left foot, which is on the right side of my body, a little bit forward, and my right foot over on the left side of my body back so that my feet are equidistant from the pelvis. And we'll sit up nice and tall here and breathe. So an option for this, if that position, no matter how high you sit yourself, is not accessible, is to lie down on your back, cross your right knee over your left knee, and hug your knees into your chest. From here, this may be enough for you. You might be able to hold onto your ankles or your shins. And then once you're holding onto your ankles or your shins, you've got to figure out which foot needs to go higher, which foot lower, so that your feet are equidistant from your hips. Ideally, shins parallel to the floor and the ceiling. And then no matter where you are, seated or lying down, you're gonna sense your bottom sets of ribs, your 11th and 12th floating ribs going wide out into the sides of the room. So as you inhale, your ribs ideally would expand out and up like bucket handles, and then as you exhale, they release down and in. Some people's ribs, they get kind of stuck on the in position. Some people's get like stuck on the out position. We want that movement, that flowing, easeful movement of the rib cage moving wide out and up as you inhale, and then dropping, swinging down and in as you exhale. So just check in with your sitting bones and notice my right sitting bone is kind of lifted off the ground. So I'm going to grab the glute and widen it back and out to the right, and then the left side. See if I can have even weight in both sitting bones. And are you back on your sitting bone and flexing the spine, kind of like you're slouched in a chair? If so, you may need to sit higher. Elevate your pelvis on a blanket, a couple blankets or a block, so that you can be right in the middle of your sitting bones. Hands can be down by your sides. I like to have my arms wide and push down into the ground to help lift the spine. Your clavicles are smiling open. The scapula are gliding down the back. And you may have a considerable amount of stretch here still, even though we've been here for a little while. We're gonna stay here for about another minute. If not, if you've eased into it, you can start to walk your hands forward. And then if you round the spine and let your bottom ribs go kind of back, you probably are losing some of your stretch. So you want to lengthen your bottom floating ribs up off of your pelvis and keep the sternum lifted, walk your hands forward. If you can keep that lift of your bottom ribs going forward and up off of your pelvis, then maybe you drape your spine down and you can rest your chin on your knee or place a block underneath your head. If you've got your hands forward, you're pushing your hands down and forward to ground the sitting bones down. If you're resting your head on the block, you could crawl the hands farther forward. And with your breath, sense the expansion of those floating ribs widening into your waist. Inhaling, ribs widen out into the side body. And then you'll bring your hands under your shoulders, lift your spine, lengthen your legs straight out in front of you for Dandasana. If you're on the ground, you can uncross your legs, roll over to your side, come up to sit, and join us here in Dandasana. And then just like in our seated postures with our legs crossed, we don't want to be back on the sitting bones, flexing the spine. So if this is not accessible to you to be right in the middle of the sitting bones, lifting the top of the sacrum up, then you sit on a blanket or a few blankets or a block. Everybody's going to push their hands down. Have your fingers pointing forward. If you've got long arms, you'll have to move your hands back. If you've got shorter arms in relation to your body, you'll need to place maybe blocks underneath your hands. But your hands are pushing down. And in this position, it's really easy to pinch closed those little floating ribs and kind of jam into the kidneys and jam into the spine. And of course, we don't want that. We want the expansive back body sensation. So you're going to keep your two sets of floating ribs widening out into the sides of your body as you push your hands down. Now you're just sitting here, but this is a rigorous posture. Press your thighs down, press your heels down, spread your toes. We'll be here for another few breaths. Let's check in with your first vertebra. So identify on your body where your atlas is and those spinous processes, how they widen out to the sides. And notice, excuse me, do you push your first vertebra forward and kind of close that vertebra in? Do you over push your first vertebra back? You want to find a width across the vertebra out into the sides of the neck and the width of your floating ribs, pressing the hands down, pressing the legs down. And in this position with your arms and your legs working, can you fill your ribs and allow them to swing out and up on the breath in and soften down and in on your exhale. And then you'll bend your knees. Maybe you have to scoot your hands a little bit farther back. Lift your chest and swing your pelvis up into a reverse tabletop position. And in this position, same thing. Can you expand your floating ribs and then line up that first vertebra? It's really hard for me to figure out where my neck goes in this position. I usually like to have my head forward. Most people like to drop their head back. But can you find your long spine with a wide first vertebra, pushing the heels down, taking the center of the buttocks up, and then keep your chest lifted, lower yourself, take a breath in, and out. And then we'll do the other side. So let's come onto your hands and your knees. And this time you'll lengthen your right leg back behind you. And you'll swing your left foot over to the right. If you did this on your back earlier, you're going to do the same variation that you chose on the right side. And you'll tuck your right knee behind your left knee, widen your feet away from one another, and sit down. So if you're on your back, you'll cross your left knee over your right knee, hug your knees into your chest, stay there for a little while. And if you're on your back, you might need lift underneath your head, maybe a blanket or a pillow underneath your head if you feel like your head is too low. So on this side, I'm not sure if you can see, but I'm really sitting on my right sitting bone. My left pelvis is not even down. So I'm going to place a blanket underneath my pelvis so that I can level the weight in my two sitting bones. All right, feet equidistant from your pelvis. So one foot will have to move back, one foot forward. If you're lying on the ground, you might just hug your knees into your chest. You could hold onto your ankles, and same thing, you want to level your feet. It's kind of like you've got some handlebars here. Hands on the ground, press down to float the spine up. Feel how you get that lift of the skull off of the first vertebra as you root your fingertips down into the ground. And then are you jamming those little delicate floating ribs in and forward? Find the width across the ribs at the back of the body and the width across the atlas, the first vertebra, at the top of your spine. Easeful breath, which for me, I'm not there yet. My breath feels very restricted still in this position. I've got to really adjust this right glute out to the side so that I can drop my left sitting bone down. There, that's better. I was kind of like jammed up into my left diaphragm and I couldn't breathe into my left lung. Maybe you exhale out of your mouth or sigh or flutter your lips to relieve some tension in the face or the heart or the lungs. All right, now I'm starting to settle. You might not be there yet. You might have already achieved that, but you can walk your hands forward. And when you did that, did your ribs go backwards? Did you rock back on your tail? You want to lift your little floating ribs up off of your pelvis. Hands are pushing down and forward so that your weight is still in your sitting bones. And then maybe you can drape forward without kind of shortening the sternum. I can't. But if you can lengthen the sternum, you can hook your chin over your knee or place your forehead on a block. You're inhaling the ribs wide out and up like bucket handles. They open out into the sides of the room and up to the ceiling. And then they settle in. They release down and in with your exhale. Lengthen your exhale and find a pause at the end of your exhale. We'll be here for about another minute. Can you sense your breath in your pelvic floor? So the muscle group that closes off the pelvic outlet, the space between your tailbone, your sitting bones, your pubic bone, kind of like a trampoline. It's a very simplistic view of the pelvic floor, but kind of like a trampoline of muscles that close off the outlet. They move down and you actually get a little stretch in your pelvic floor musculature as you inhale, or ideally you do. And then you'll bring your hands back by your pelvis. Sit nice and tall in the middle of your sitting bones. And then we'll lengthen the legs out in front of you for a Dandasana. Staff pose. Press the thighs down. You're in the center of your heels. The toes are spreading. Root your palms down. Fingertips are ideally facing straight forward. Again, you might have to move your hands back or place blocks underneath your hands to adjust for your body. Top of the sacrum lifting up. You're in the middle of your sitting bones. Press your thighs down, press your heels down. If you can't be in the middle of your sitting bones, if you're back on your sitting bones and your sternum is dropping and you're pushing your floating ribs back, you need to elevate your pelvis. widening through the first vertebra, widening through the floating ribs. Take an inhale, and then exhale, feet go down, swing your pelvis up, lift out of your shoulder girdle, your heels are pressing down. Your back ribs are wide, align the first vertebra with the rest of your spine. Take an inhale, and then keep your chest lifted, and you'll lower your pelvis down and rest. All right, let's just do a little twist on the back. With a little bit more movement in the spine. So you'll lie down on your back, and you'll cross your right knee over your left knee. Palms can be facing down by your sides, and you'll swing your knees to the right and back to center. Inhale as the knees sway to the right, and exhale as the knees come back to center. So we're just going right center, right center. And as you do this, can you sense any movement in your first vertebra? Ideally, this tug of the knees twists the pelvis, and then sequentially the spine follows suit. And even the first vertebra responds. You might not be there yet, and that's fine. Don't try to force it, but let your head be really heavy as you twist. And then we'll switch sides. I like to pause in between and sense the difference between the two halves of the body. It's always so profound, even with just a gentle, simple movement. You'll inhale, sway knees left, exhale, knees back to center. How far up your spine does your body respond to the twist of your pelvis? Scan your spine. Can you sense your entire spine? Are there black holes in the awareness of your spine? And then you'll uncross your legs, place your feet standing. And you can roll over to your side. Pause on your side for a moment. Let your heart rotate down towards the ground. And press yourself up to sit. I like to sit in Virasana. It's a nice square position. But sit level, cross-legged, and Virasana. You can sit on a chair. I just adjusted my glutes back. Rest your hands in your lap and close your eyes. Sense your breath. Where is your first vertebra in space? Do you have the width across the top vertebra? Sense the movement of your rib cage. Can you feel the expansion of your floating ribs? And bring your hands to prayer. Spread your fingers really well, especially your thumbs. Press your palms together. The entire circumference of the palms are pressing. Connect your prayer to the bottom of your sternum. Keeping your back ribs wide and your first vertebra lifted, you'll roll your skull atop the first vertebra to bow your head. So you're not bowing or flexing in the cervical spine. Your neck stays lifted. That cervical spine, that atlas, the first vertebra is still lifted. Place your hands down. Head glides up and eyes float open. Thank you for joining today. Have a great day.